Hey there VR gang, it's Brandon, your friendly internet postmaster, back with my long overdue video on Crimson Desert. And I wish I could say I'm fashionably late, but that implies I'm fashionable at all. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into my good news, bad news, but hopefully helpful Crimson Desert VR settings guide.
Alright. Who the hell are you?
Okay, so I'm running 3920 by 3920 resolution, using DLSS 4.0 on balanced, textures and model quality on ultra. I have lighting quality on ultra, which saves a big chunk of performance, and also lowers the cost of having RT on. With almost everything else on high, looks pretty solid. Just another glorious day in R.E.A.L.
Salutations.
What's this? How dare you introduce artifacts into my game, sir?
What happened to your honor?
Probably should have mentioned, this is the bad news part of the video. Since this game follows the modern trend of using real-time ray tracing, that brings with it the common visual issues and artifacts we see both in VR and flat. The drastic lighting changes, like the one you just saw, make it difficult to nail down settings. But I'll do some comparisons here and give you what I think works best currently to mitigate those issues while not tanking performance. Lighting quality is going to be the biggest driver of visual quality outside of resolution. And of course, texture and model quality. Setting this to max will definitely help mitigate some of the shimmering, flickering, and shadow artifacts currently in this game. I do have RT on, but we'll cover that in a bit. Next, we'll look at ray reconstruction, which for NVIDIA users is going to force you to have max lighting and ray tracing on anyways. You can see that it does clean up the shadow issue for the most part, although there's still a bit of oddness, for example, around this guy's hand. It also has even less shimmering and flickering, but it does kind of soften image and lighting quality, as you can see on the trees. This would improve some if I moved up my DLSS quality level, but that of course costs even more performance. Overall, this fixes a lot of issues, and things like reflections look fantastic. But let's head back and try out some other stuff before I give you my final thoughts. I'll move back to using max lighting and RT with no ray reconstruction. As we saw, the game isn't always going to present you with these kinds of lighting issues, only in certain conditions. Camera distance plays a big part in these kinds of shadow issues, for example. So we could just move the camera out, and voila, they're gone. There are multiple mods on Nexus to better control camera positioning, as well as one that stops the camera from zooming in and out. I'll link those down below. If you want to avoid using ray reconstruction, playing in a somewhat close-up third-person camera is a pretty solid workaround. You can also switch back and forth depending on the lighting conditions. But what if you're on older hardware and even the cost of max lighting is too much of a hit? Well, there's an interesting quirk with lighting that we can take advantage of to a degree here. If you set lighting quality to medium, it seems to get rid of the garbled shadows on NPCs. Now the downside to that is more shimmering and flickering, worse overall vegetation, and distant object quality. But the upside is a ton of performance room if you really need it, or if you just want to push resolution really high. For example, I can move up to 4200 by 4200 and DLSS quality without even breaking a sweat. You could also try using DLAA here, but I find the performance cost of DLAA to be worse than using max lighting, and it doesn't do nearly as much to help shimmering and flickering. While we're on the subject of DLSS, I find that 4.0, which uses preset K, seems to hold up best with motion, but I personally use preset E, which further reduces foliage flickering and shimmering. Just an FYI, you don't have to switch DLSS versions to use different presets. The newer versions currently have all the presets. I'm using DLSS Swapper, which I'll link below, but you could also do the same thing with the NVIDIA app. The preset you're using also determines the performance impact. So moving to preset E, even on a newer DLSS version, will still gain you a bit more performance. But as always, feel free to experiment and see what suits your brain. Ray tracing and lighting quality are very much tied together, and I can't really see any scenario outside of performance to turn RT off. You can see here that disabling RT makes shadows much worse. This goes for outside scenes as well. You'll just end up with black splotches in places sometimes, and worse reflection and lighting quality. RT and lighting quality are very much tied together in this game, so disabling RT doesn't fully disable ray tracing or the usual issues it brings anyways. The cost of RT is also tied to the level of lighting quality you're using. It's actually very negligible until you get up to cinematic and then much heavier at max lighting. Being that they're so tied together, I'd really recommend just keeping RT on. So this next one's pretty hard to see in the video, but if you ever noticed odd transparent or deformed textures on buildings and rocks like this, it's linked to the displacement setting. Turning it off solves it completely, but at the cost of flatter textures. You could also try setting it to low or medium as a compromise. Another thing to keep in mind with lighting in this game is the player lamp. It brings its own quirks along with it. For instance, in this scene, when I turn my lamp on, all the other light sources become mostly irrelevant and the world gets really dark. Turn it off, and the world suddenly becomes a much brighter place. I personally keep this off unless I need it in a cave or to locate interest points in the world. But definitely keep it in mind as a light source that affects the game. So let's check back with our two best friends here and talk about some really helpful sliders that Luke added into the framework. The FOV limit sliders should ideally work for most any headset that uses Oculus Runtime natively or OpenXR through Steam. You can find them in the main tab of the R.E.A.L overlay here. The long and short of it is that you can adjust these sliders to limit how much of the game is displayed in your headset's horizontal and vertical FOV. There is a checkbox above them that will be checked by default. This allows R.E.A.L to try and better match the aspect ratio of your headset as you adjust these sliders, so you don't end up with a bigger black margin on the sides than the bottom, or the other way around. You can uncheck this box if you'd rather manually adjust both the horizontal and vertical FOV yourself with the sliders. If you look near the top of the R.E.A.L overlay here, just below the recenter button that's highlighted in orange, you can see that my headset is displaying at 27.5 pixels per degree currently. Now if I adjust both FOV sliders to around 0.900 and hit the apply FOV restrictions, I have now restricted my FOV in both directions by around 10%. Now this won't show up as an immediate performance increase, but if you look again, I'm now displaying at 30.3 pixels per degree. So if I want to use this to increase performance, I could then lower the resolution down to get back to around 27 ppd and therefore gain some extra performance overhead. So let's take a look at Luke Ross's recommended settings and how he uses the FOV sliders to get all the eye candy this game can muster. You can find these on the Patreon post for Crimson Desert, but I'll highlight them here too. Keep in mind this is on a 5090 system using a Quest 3, so if you have a different system or you're using a different headset, where you fall on the sliders and the resolution will be different, but the approach is still the same. So first I'll lower my resolution to 2032 by 2032, so I have plenty of performance room when I crank up the settings. Then we'll change our settings preset to cinematic. Then we'll need to change our upscale mode to DLSS 4.5L using DLAA, and turn on ray reconstruction. So now we have settings as maxed out as we can get, but we're currently sitting at 15.1 pixels per degree, which doesn't look that great in your headset. So the final step, of course, is to adjust the FOV sliders. Since I have the box checked to allow R.E.A.L to lock the aspect ratio of these sliders to better fit the FOV of the headset, I won't end up exactly where Luke recommends, but close enough. After hitting the Apply FOV Restrictions button, I'm now rendering at 23.4 pixels per degree. And though you can't see it in the recording, the area of my FOV in the headset where the game is no longer rendering is black. And we'll also switch over to 1/3 rendering mode as Luke suggested.
Hi there.
Now I don't end up with a rock solid 48 FPS, but I'm recording at the same time, and it's pretty close.
Good day.
I do have to say, for the amount of crazy graphic settings we're running on a modern title like this is pretty impressive. Don't sleep on the sliders.
Hi there.
You might find that the limited FOV is not as limiting to your experience as you might think. Well, I've already taken up enough of your time, so instead of trying to summarize, I just made a quick list of notes that I'll attach in the description. There you'll find pretty much everything I discussed here, along with some links to some camera mods, a big texture pack, and a graphics mod to keep an eye on in the future.
Hello.
The last thing I'd recommend is clearing out your shader cache. Once you have your settings dialed in, or if you find that you're having some extra odd DLSS or graphical issues, this can really help reset things. You'll find these files in the NVIDIA folder inside your app data local folder. Just click into the DX cache folder there and delete all the files it will allow you to. Until next time, VR gang, praise the fun!